Welcome, listener. Today we're going to embark on a deep dive into some truly perplexing, really chilling, unsolved mysteries. We've gathered some fascinating stories, drawing quite a bit from a transcript we came across, and honestly, they're the kind that really make you think.
Absolutely. And what's so compelling about these, seemingly disconnected cases, we've got modern disappearances, ancient rituals, medical oddities, is how they all sort of highlight the edges of what we know. They really bring up these enduring questions that haunt us.
Right. So our goal today is to unpack these narratives, pull out the most unsettling details, and really explore why these cases are just so stubbornly unsolved. Get ready, because some of this gets really interesting and pretty dark. Okay, let's start with the first one. It's the terrifying disappearance of Dorothy Scott from Anaheim, California, back in 1980. Now, she was a single mother, and for months she'd been tormented by this obsessive stalker. The voice on the phone sounded familiar, she said, but she just couldn't place it.
That's the calls themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Threats like he'd cut her into pieces so that her body will never be found. Just awful.
What's particularly chilling here, I think, is the stalker's level of knowledge. It wasn't just vague threats. He'd describe what Dorothy was wearing, what she was doing at that moment. It proves this constant invasive surveillance. It's more than harassment. It's this profound violation, a total invasion of privacy and control.
Yeah, it got so bad she took karate lessons, even thought about getting a handgun for protection.
Understandably so.
So fast forward to May 28th. She's at work, and a coworker, Conrad Bostrom, gets sick. Big red mark on his arm. Dorothy and another employee, Pam Head, they take him to the hospital. Doctors figure it's probably a spider bite, nothing too unusual initially.
Right.
But they end up waiting for hours for Conrad to be discharged. And then Dorothy makes this fateful decision. She tells Pam and Conrad to wait inside, says she'll go get the car and pull it around to the entrance. She goes out. A few moments later, they see her car coming towards the exit, but it's moving way too fast. Then the high beams flash on, blinding them for a second, and the car just speeds past them out onto the main road. And Dorothy, she was never seen alive again.
Wow. And connecting that to the bigger picture, the abduction seems meticulously planned, doesn't it?
Right.
Her car is found later, 10 miles away in the Santa Ana alley, abandoned and set on fire.
Completely torched. No trace of Dorothy inside.
It just screams, destroying evidence, trying to erase any link, any clue. It makes you wonder if the whole hospital situation, the coworker getting sick, was that part of the plan? Or just a grim opportunity seized?
It's hard to say, but what makes this case truly sadistic are the phone calls that followed. To Dorothy's mother.
4 years.
Almost every Wednesday, the same low, gruff voice, clearly disguised, saying things like, historically there, I've got her, I killed her. Just tormenting the family.
That raises such a disturbing question, doesn't it? What kind of person gets pleasure from that kind of prolonged cruelty? Inflicting grief over and over again. And the caller was careful too. Never stayed on long enough to be traced, even though they recorded many of the calls. It shows a high degree of cunning, psychological manipulation, really.
Her remains were finally found, partially, in mid-1984. A construction worker stumbled upon them under some dog bones, actually, in brush off Santa Ana Canyon Road. A human pelvis, an arm, 2 thighs, a skull.
Just fragments.
Yeah. And a watch found, but the body had stopped. 12:30 a.m., May 29th, 1980. Right around the time she vanished.
The exact night.
And here's the kicker. The very day the newspapers announced her body had been found, the Scott family gets 2 final calls. Same voice. Historically there.
Unbelievable. That kind of, as the source puts it, sadistic dedication. It speaks volumes about the killer's mindset. Deeply psychopathic, the complete disregard for life, and this active desire to inflict pain on the family. Makes you wonder, was Dorothy his only victim?
We just don't know. Both her parents passed away never finding out who did this. It's just... It leaves you with that awful feeling that some mysteries, well, they might never really be solved.
A truly chilling thought.
Okay, let's shift from crime to a medical mystery. This one sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, honestly. It's known as sleeping sickness, or Encephalitis Lethargica, a strange plague that just appeared in 1916 and then, poof, vanished by 1928.
Appeared and disappeared, just like that.
Exactly. And this disease, it attacked the nervous system. About 1/3 of the people who got it died. Another 1/3 survived, but were often left with severe neurological damage. Changed their lives forever.
But it's that last third. That's where it gets really bizarre. They were left in this state described as somewhere between life and death. Plunged into this deep slumber that could last for months, Years, even
You
decades.
Imagine that, being a living statue. Aware, maybe, but trapped. One patient reportedly stayed like that for over 70 years.
Incredible and utterly terrifying.
Yeah. And many people might actually know about this, maybe without realizing it, from the movie Awakenings, with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro.
Oh, right, based on Oliver Sacks' book.
Exactly. Dr. Sacks, the neurologist, he discovered something remarkable. He found that giving L-Dopa, a drug usually for Parkinson's, to some of these patients could bring them back. To a state of conscious lucidity, anyway.
Temporarily, though, right?
Yeah, often just for a short while, like a brief window opening, then closing again.
And this raises a huge question from a sort of epidemiological standpoint. How does a disease just show up like that, rage for a decade or so, and then completely disappear with no clear cause identified?
Yeah.
Even now, we don't really know for sure what caused it. It's unsettling.
Definitely. And the accounts from the patients themselves during those lucid moments or from their dreams, they're incredibly creepy. One patient, called Miss A, she described dreaming she was trapped in this inescapable castle that had the form and shape of herself, or that she'd become a living, sentient statue made of stone. She dreamed the whole world had just stopped, and of, quote, a death that was different from death.
Good Lord. That really highlights the profound psychological toll, doesn't it? Being lost in this kind of inescapable nightmare, trapped inside a body that won't respond. Sacks noted how many were essentially forgotten, just left in hospitals or asylums, living out this statute existence.
So sad.
And when they had those brief moments of clarity on L-Dopa, many expressed this desperate yearning for a twofold miracle. Not just a cure, but also some kind of indemnification, some making up for their lost lives. It's just a profound illustration of the human cost of something we still don't fully understand.
Okay, now let's take a trip. Back to 1948, Adelaide, Australia. This case is often called the world's most perplexing cold case. The Somerton Beach Man.
Ah, yes, the Tamam Shud case.
That's the one. So this man is found lying on Somerton Beach, immaculately dressed in a suit and tie. At first, people thought maybe he was just drunk, sleeping it off.
But he wasn't sleeping.
No, he was dead. And right away, things were strange. No signs of violence, but the coroner suspected poisoning. Yet the toxicology report came back negative. No known poisons found in his system.
Which is baffling in itself. His liver was engorged, pupils were unusually small, spleen was about 3 times normal size. Something major had happened internally, but the what remained elusive. Could it have been a poison they couldn't test for back then? Or something incredibly fast-acting? We don't know.
And adding to the mystery, all the name tags, every single one had been carefully cut out of his clothes. Like someone went to great lengths to make him unidentifiable.
Very deliberate.
And there was this one odd detail. A trouser pocket had been repaired with this very specific, unusual type of orange thread. Remember that orange thread?
Got it. Orange thread.
His physical description was odd too. Really well-developed calf muscles, like a trained athlete maybe. And the shape of his feet suggested he often wore high-heeled, pointed shoes. One expert even suggested he might have been a ballet dancer.
So, a potentially athletic man, maybe a dancer, dressed impeccably, tags removed, cause of death unknown. It paints a very strange picture.
And despite sending fingerprints worldwide, nobody could identify him. He was a complete unknown. Which again points to someone wanting him to remain unknown.
Absolutely, an intentional erasure of identity.
So 4 months go by, then a breakthrough. Sort of. A suitcase is found, checked into the cloakroom at the Adelaide train station, believed to be his.
Okay, what was inside?
A few things. A table knife, sharpened, a stencil kit like sailors use for marking cargo, a reel of that exact same unusual orange thread used on his trousers.
Ah, the thread connects.
Yes, and some clothes. 3 items had the name T. Keene written on them, but police investigated Keenes in English-speaking countries, found nothing. They eventually concluded it was likely a dead end, maybe even planted.
Another layer of misdirection, perhaps.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really weird. Police re-examine the man's clothes, the ones he was found in, and they find a tiny hidden pocket sewn into the waistband of his trousers. A fob pocket, almost invisible.
Hidden? What was in it?
A tiny rolled-up piece of paper. And on it were just 2 words, printed. Tamam Shud.
Tamam Shud. Persian, right. Meaning...
It is ended, or it is finished. Turns out this phrase had been torn from the very last page of a specific edition of a poetry book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Okay, so they needed to find that specific book.
And they did. After a public appeal, a local man came forward. He said he found a copy of the Rubaiyat tossed onto the back seat of his unlocked car around the time the body was discovered. He hadn't thought much of it.
Wow. So the actual book the scrap came from, did it have answers?
Not exactly answers, more mystery. Inside the back cover of that specific book, faintly written in pencil, was what looked like a code. 5 lines of seemingly random capital letters. And despite efforts by cryptographers, military intelligence, amateurs, no one has ever definitively cracked it.
An unbreakable code, linked to a dead man with no name, found with a Persian phrase meaning, "it is ended." Sounds like spy fiction.
It really does. Theories range from him being a spy, maybe Soviet, maybe Western, assassinated, to an elaborate, perhaps ritualistic suicide. The authorities even had his body embalmed with formalin and buried him in a concrete-lined grave, hoping future science might provide answers.
Preserving the main piece of evidence, essentially.
Yeah, and one last poignant detail. For the next 30 years or so, at odd intervals, flowers would mysteriously appear on the Somerton man's grave.
Really? So someone knew him, someone cared, but they stayed silent.
Exactly. As anonymous as the man himself. Just adding another layer of quiet tragedy to it all.
Absolutely baffling.
Okay, let's move to another heartbreaking story. This one from Woodward, Oklahoma, also in 1948. It follows a massive, devastating tornado that ripped through the town, tragically killing 185 people.
A terrible disaster.
In the aftermath, a 4-year-old girl named Joan Gay Craft lost her mother. Her stepfather was critically injured. Joan herself and her half-sister Jerry survived with only minor injuries. They ended up taking shelter in the basement of the local hospital, which was overwhelmed, chaotic, full of other survivors.
A scene of utter chaos, I imagine.
Absolutely. And while they're down there, these 2 men show up, dressed in what look like army khakis, maybe fatigues. They walk into the basement, and they know Joan by name.
They knew her name in that chaos.
Yes. They claimed they needed to take her immediately to another hospital where her injured stepfather was supposedly being treated.
That sounds suspicious right away. Especially in what was described as a very small community where supposedly everyone knew everyone. How did these 2 strangers know her name, yet nobody recognized them?
Exactly. It feels targeted. Joan didn't want to go. She was clinging to her sister Jerry, crying. But the men were insistent, reassuring, saying everything's going to be okay. They promised they'd come back for Jerry soon. Then they just picked Joan up and carried her out.
Did anyone try to stop them?
Hospital staff did confront them, apparently. But in the confusion, with so many victims being moved to different facilities because the hospital was overloaded, the staff were convinced these men were legitimate officials, maybe military personnel helping out.
So the chaos of the disaster provided the perfect cover.
It seems so. It shows just how vulnerable things become in a crisis. Assumptions are made, protocols might break down.
And they never came back for her sister, Jerry.
Never. And Joan Gay Craft was never seen again. She vanished into the aftermath of the storm.
That is utterly devastating. The timing, using a natural disaster like that, it's beyond cruel. It makes tracking them, finding any leads, almost impossible amidst all that destruction and confusion. It's a terrible, unresolved tragedy for that family.
Truly awful. Okay, let's shift gears again. A bit more modern, but still deeply perplexing. The disappearance of the musician known as Q Lazzarus.
Oh, Goodbye Horses.
That's the one. An incredible song, kind of eerie, made super famous by the movie Silence of the Lambs, right? The scene with Buffalo Bill.
Iconic scene, unforgettable song, a real cult hit.
Definitely. But the thing is, after about 1996, information about Q Lazzarus just dries up, completely vanishes online and elsewhere. It started with a Reddit user asking years ago, hey, does anyone know what happened to Q Lazzarus? And tons of people joined the search, but nothing. The trail just went cold.
Which is pretty strange, even for a one-hit wonder, especially as the internet was really starting to take off then.
Yeah.
You'd expect some trace. We know her real name was Diane Lucky, or sometimes credited as Creon Alaki.
Diane Lucky seems to be the confirmed name now, though Creon Alaki was used. There were reports she moved to the UK, wanted to start a heavy metal band even.
A heavy metal band. Interesting shift.
Yeah. Her former manager apparently last saw her looking unwell, and there were concerning reports, rumors really, that she'd gotten close to someone described as a Swedish hustler and cokehead.
Oh dear.
Yeah. The suggestion was this person kind of isolated her, cut her off from people, filtered everyone away.
That sounds worrying. Like potential control or manipulation.
Yeah. It does. And the songwriter of Goodbye Horses, William Garvey, actually said at one point he was pretty certain she must be dead.
He thought she was dead.
Yeah, and adding to the mystery, perhaps the most practical, puzzling part, she apparently has unclaimed music royalties just sitting there, waiting to be collected.
Unclaimed royalties. Given how often Goodbye Horses has been used in films, TV, samples, that could be a significant amount of money, couldn't it?
You'd think so. So why hasn't she or someone representing her estate, if she had passed, claimed it? That's a big question mark.
It really is. It forces you to ask, is this just someone who genuinely wanted to disappear, live a completely private life off the grid? Or did something more sinister happen? Even her old bandmate, Gloriana Galicia, has said she honestly doesn't know if Q is alive or dead.
The money thing is,
Yeah.
it's usually a powerful motivator for people to surface, Absolutely. So what does it all mean? Maybe she's just living quietly somewhere, completely offline. But for someone whose one song had such a massive cult impact, the total lack of concrete information is, well, it's unsettling. Like the lyrics say, all things pass into the night. It feels that she did too.
A very strange modern vanishing act.
Okay, for our last story today, we're going way back, like 7,000 years back, to Germany and a place called the Herxheim ritual site.
Ah, Herxheim. A truly disturbing archaeological find.
Isn't it? So in 1996, construction workers accidentally unearthed these prehistoric remains. It turned out to be this huge ritual site surrounded by mass graves. They found the remains of at least 500 human bodies, but estimates suggest there could be up to 1,500 people buried there in total.
An enormous number for that period. And the remains were diverse men, women, children, from newborns right up to the elderly. It wasn't selective.
No. But the forensic evidence from the bones, this is where it gets really gruesome. The analysis showed these people were generally healthy when they died. But before they were buried, their bones had been systematically stripped of all flesh.
Stripped clean, using techniques apparently that resembled ancient methods for butchering livestock.
Exactly. Applied to humans. And the bones themselves had been cracked open, crushed, likely to get at the marrow inside. Many skulls were carefully split open, probably to remove the brains.
The evidence points overwhelmingly towards cannibalism on a massive scale.
It really does. And it wasn't just human remains. They also found bones from at least 200 dogs mixed in.
Dogs too, interesting.
Yeah, and buried along with the bodies were all sorts of trinkets, talismans, pottery, tools, personal items. Some of these artifacts came from cultures hundreds of kilometers away, as far as 500 kilometers.
Which tells us this wasn't just a local graveyard, right? People, or at least their remains and belongings, were coming from vast distances. The number of bodies alone is far more than a single settlement back then could account for.
Right, so the big question is, what on earth happened at Herxheim 7,000 years ago? Why were so many people processed, let's say, and buried there like this?
The theories are varied and, frankly, all quite disturbing.
Definitely. Some suggest large-scale religious human sacrifice. Others propose something more like an elephant graveyard concept for humans. Maybe the sick and dying traveled there from all over to end their days, which could explain the distant artifacts. Or perhaps cannibalism was just part of their normal burial ritual.
A ritualistic consumption, maybe, rather than purely for sustenance. And the artifacts being smashed. That's curious, too.
Yeah, almost everything buried there was deliberately broken or destroyed before being put in the pits.
Why do that? Was destroying possessions part of the ritual? Maybe sending them into the afterlife with the person? Or a more pragmatic reason, did they believe belongings were so personal that smashing them would deter grave robbers, make them useless?
We'll likely never know for sure, will we? It's this incredible, yet deeply disturbing window into our very distant ancestors. It leaves you with these incredibly graphic images and just profound questions about prehistoric life, belief systems, and maybe the darker sides of human history.
Absolutely. It pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about the past.
So we've covered a lot today. Harrowing disappearances like Dorothy Scott and little Joan Craft, that bizarre sleeping plague, the enigma of the Somerton Man, the quiet vanishing of Q Lazzarus, and this ancient, brutal ritual site at Herxheim.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how each one, despite being so different in time, place, context, they all consistently bump up against the limits of our knowledge. They challenge our understanding of human behavior, cruelty, belief, desperation, mystery itself. They really underscore the enduring power of the unknown.
Yeah, they serve as these potent reminders, don't they? That sometimes the stories that stick with us the most, the ones that are the most disturbing, are the ones that simply don't have a final chapter, the ones without an answer.
Which leads to a really important question, I think, for you, our listener. We live in a world that craves answers, clarity, resolution. So, how do we process these stories? How do we find closure or even just meaning in narratives that stubbornly refuse to give up their secrets?
That's a great point. Perhaps the real deep dive isn't just looking at the facts we have, but looking into the unsettling questions these mysteries force us to confront, the things they leave behind in our minds.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the unexplained. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about, maybe spark some curiosity. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious.